All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're glad to have you all here today. We are here this afternoon to determine possible eligibility for a student, Forrest Gump. Thank you, Mrs. Gump, for being here today with us and for returning our notice that we sent to you so that we know you were coming today. That's very helpful. We thought we'd start by having everyone go around the table and just introduce themselves so that you know everyone and kind of what their job is. I'm Mrs. Keurig. I'm the principal here at Crab Cake Middle School.
I'm Cynthia Watson. I'm the assistant principal.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie Hanrahan. I'm Forrest General Education teacher for reading.
Hi, my name is Katrina Cannon. I'm the occupational therapy specialist.
Hi, I'm Paula McConnell. I'm the school psychologist.
I'm Shanta Blyden, special education teacher.
I'm Chris Fredericks. I'm the case manager.
I'm Julie Gump, Forrest Mom.
Welcome, Mrs. Gump. So we thought we would just begin by having you tell us a little bit about Forrest and why we're here today.
Well, Forrest was previously being serviced on an IEP back in Alabama before we moved here. He was born in Alabama, and his father and I never married. I don't know much about his biological father. He has no history of any health problems other than he had scoliosis, but he's no longer receiving any treatment for that, and he no longer wears braces on his legs. He's not currently on any medication. He began school at the age of 3. He did repeat kindergarten. His teachers felt that he wasn't quite ready to move on to first grade at that point. And under his previous IEP, he was receiving positive response to his goals, but I'm not quite sure how accurate that was because his grades tended to be anywhere between the B- range to the D range. And then pretty much he's a happy kid, except he did experience some bullying by neighborhood boys.
So thank you, Mrs. Gump. Mr. Fredericks, who's our case manager, we thought we'd go with you next to have you tell a little bit more detail about Forrest.
Absolutely. I'm going to be piggybacking on what a lot of Mrs. Gump said. So Forrest is a 14-year-old white man who is referred for a psychological evaluation by his mother. Like she said, he just transferred from Alabama. The specific concerns is that he's identified him as a child with disability from age 3. He unfortunately had to repeat kindergarten because his teacher thought he was not being promoted to the first, or not performing grade level, so he wasn't promoted to the first grade. Reviewing Forrest's educational history reveals normal grade promotion after repeated kindergarten, therefore making him 14 years old and currently in the 8th grade. Forrest has recently worn braces on his legs to correct scoliosis. Luckily for him, the braces were removed, and he seems like he has full strength and use of his legs.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for us, Ms. Gump?
No.
I think now we'll move to our occupational therapist, Ms. Cannon.
Hi again, my name is Katrina Cannon. I'm one of the occupational therapists here in our school division, and based on the information I'm able to gather about Forrest, based on documentation and observation, I do understand, like was previously stated, he used braces at one time, but no longer uses them and has full strength and mobility in his legs. And I've also had a chance to experience him looking as if he's a gifted sprinter and fully functioning with his legs. So that's good news to hear.
Thank you. Does that sound okay? Do you have any questions for us?
No, he really
regarding
does enjoy
OT?
running.
Wonderful. And now we'll go to our speech therapist, Ms. Cannon.
All right. I had a chance to do some assessing with Forrest one-on-one. I administered the comprehensive test of phonological processing, and it both assesses the phonological awareness, phonological memory, and rapid naming. Persons or people with deficits in one or more of these kinds of phonological processing abilities may have more difficulty learning to read than those that do not. Forrest scored in the below average range on 2 of the subtests, specifically the phonological awareness portion and the rapid naming, and was in the low average range on the phonological memory portion. Just a little bit more to add. His phonological awareness score was 70. He was in the 11th percentile. And the phonological memory score was 90, and the 36th percentile in rapid naming score was 82 in the 21st percentile, so he did a little bit better on the rapid naming portion.
Does that sound okay, Ms. Gump? Do you have any questions for us about speech? I think now we'll move to his general education teacher, Ms. Hanrahan, to tell us a little bit about his classroom experiences.
So we've had Forrest in our school for about a month now, and he has been a pleasure to have in class. He is very talkative with the other students in an appropriate way. He seems to be getting along very well. I know you expressed concerns about bullying, and so far, so good. He seems to be getting along with everyone very well. We have a really nice classroom community, and he seems to fit in really well. So hopefully he comes home saying some similar things about what's happening in school. As far as academically, he really enjoys participating, and he seems highly motivated. We have noticed that he kind of gets a little bit frustrated if it requires too much reading or if the problem solving just becomes a little bit too complex. He will work with the problem or the reading task to a certain point, and then he sort of gets frustrated and kind of gives up a little bit. We did test him using the Scholastic Reading Inventory reading assessment, and he scored a 256, which is just about mid-first grade reading level, so he is below what we would like to see him performing at in the 8th grade. And as far as math, about similar. He is performing below where we would like to be seeing him. In science, he performs very well. That seems to be a strength for him. He seems to be very hands-on and seems to be very actively engaged in those areas, so that's definitely something we're trying to push for him and try to build up his confidence, and that seems to be a good place for him.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanrahan. Does that sound okay? Do you have any questions for Ms. Hanrahan or us about this question? I think now we'll move to Ms. McConnell, who's our school psychologist, to talk a little bit about. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to move to our special ed teacher, Ms. Gladden, to talk a little bit about her experiences.
Some of the needs that we determine with Forrest is that he does not achieve adequately for his age level, and he doesn't meet the standard grade when provided with age-appropriate learning experiences in the following areas: oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading fluency, reading comprehension, mathematics calculation, and mathematics problem solving. And so the strengths that we do see are perceptual reasoning, knowledge of general information, reflecting average exposure to the information, as well as average alertness. He also has knowledge of conventional social behavior with his strengths. Forrest achieved his best performance among the nonverbal reasoning tasks on the Matrix reasoning subtest. And working memory, Forrest's performance on auditory memory tasks is similar to auditory processing tasks. He does better when required to repeat a sequence forward or backwards or blend together information presented in a sequence, but he does suffer when required to reorganize information. Some of the needs that we determined was that he needs extended time on assessments and assignments. He also needs clear and concise directions on his assessments and assignments, backup notes, the use of calculator on assessments that includes the SOL, or what we call our standards of learning, parental seating, small group testing with minimal distractions, reading directions, as well as speech and language services. That was all I had.
Do you have any questions for her about his needs?
No, that all sounds accurate.
And so now we'll move to our school psychologist, Ms. McConnell, to talk a little bit about the testing she administered.
Okay, so I administered some different tests. I'm just going to read you the results from those tests. I administered 7 subtests from the Wilshire Intelligence Scale for Children, and it is basically an individually administered comprehensive clinical instrument for assessing the intelligence of children ages 6 through 16. The results of it are reported as standard scores with a mean of 100. And the average range falls between 90 and 109. So when I tell you his score, you can kind of see where he falls in between that. The subtest scores contribute to the index scores, which is the total that represent the intellectual functioning in specified cognitive areas. This assessment also produces a full-scale IQ composite score that represents an estimate of general cognitive ability, and the FSIQ is derived from 10 subtests, which are drawn from 5 areas of cognitive ability: verbal comprehension, visual, spatial ability, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. So his general cognitive ability is within the below average range as measured by the FSIQ. His overall thinking and reasoning abilities exceeded those of approximately 4% of children his age. So his FSIQ score was 70, and he was in the 4th percentile. Forrest's verbal reasoning abilities are in the low average range, and his nonverbal reasoning abilities are in the borderline below average range. His subtest results from the Wechslers was verbal comprehension score was 87, which was the 32nd percentile. The perceptual reasoning was an 81 with the 14th percentile, and working memory was 71 with the 5th percentile. Processing speed was a score of 60, and that was in the second percentile. We also did the Connors-Wells self-report. That was administered, and a T-score of 70 was received on that, showing that he has inattentive disability with cognitive problems. I also administered the Woodcock-Johnson test for achievement, and it just shows that his skills are evenly distributed, although each area measured by the Woodcock-Johnson indicates that Forrest achieves in the below average range, with skills typically younger that you would see for younger elementary kids. The subtest results, reading for the Woodcock-Johnson letter word identification, he was in the 6th percentile, which is basically like a first grade level. Reading fluency, he was in the 6th percentile, which is also equivalent to a first grade level. Passage comprehension was the 14th percentile, so that's 2nd grade level, so we kind of know his comprehension is a little bit better than his fluency and phonics and blending and stuff like that. Broad reading score, he was in the 9th percentile. His math on the Woodcock-Johnson, he was, for calculating, he was in the 14th percentile, which is a 2nd grade level. His fluency was in the 17th percentile, which was a 3rd grade level. His applied problem-solving skills was 13th percentile, which was the 2nd grade level, and broad mathematics score overall was 13th percentile. Let's see. We also did the writing, let me continue with the writing for the Woodcock-Johnson. Sound awareness score was 16th percentile, which is 2nd grade, and broad written language was 8th percentile. His spelling subtest score was a 68, writing fluency is a 72, and writing samples score was a 71. So with all of that combined, he's still performing at the low to low average range. We also did the DSM, which is a system and a model that is designed to provide a comprehensive diagnosis that includes a complete picture of the student for their mental health. So there are 5 parts to that test, and in Axis 1, the results were a learning disorder, cognitive disorder, and stuttering was what it showed for that. Axis 2 showed that he was ID'd, and Axis 3 results were scoliosis, so that's where you have a neurological condition. So that showed up for that, and nothing for Axis 4, and Axis 5 identifies his functioning scale on 0 to 100, top being 100, and he performed at a 90.
That was a lot. Does that sound okay? Do you have any questions about?
I don't think I have any questions. There's a lot.
Yeah, you'll get a copy of all of
Yes.
this too.
Okay.
I think you get a copy of all the test results.
So I think we've heard all the testing and experiences from everybody at the table. So I think now we need to go around and say whether or not we believe that Forrest is in fact eligible or not eligible for special education services. So we'll just go around and everybody can say yes or no.
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Based on my findings and my experiences, I'm of the opinion that he would benefit from special education services in the area of speech language.
Yes.
guys think it's appropriate?
Yes.
I agree as well. So we are going to now we have to determine what category of services he would fall under and to determine those. So I'm going to let our case manager, Mr. Fredericks, kind of walk us through some of our checklists in determining those categories.
So as a committee, we looked at two different checklists, one being specific learning disability and another is speech therapy. And we're going to talk about the specific learning disability checklist now. So we decided that there isn't a lack of instruction in reading and math, nor he isn't limited English proficiency. So we do see that he is not achieving adequately with his same grade age peers in the following areas, which is mathematics calculations, mathematics problem solving, basic reading skill, reading comprehension, reading fluency skills, and oral expressions. There's a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes that are affecting his language spoken or written abilities in these areas, which is auditory processing, auditory memory, executive functions, fluid reasoning, long-term recall, phonological processing, visual memory, visual spatial processing, and working memory. Then we look at the processing disorder impacts a student in areas or specific areas. Again, it's the first areas that I spoke of: the mathematics calculations, mathematics problem solving, oral expression, reading fluency skills, listening comprehension, reading comprehension. And then the evaluation outcomes is that using response to research-based intervention, or RTI, the student does not make sufficient progress to meet his same grade age peers. The source of data that we looked at to make this decision were his grades, evaluations from teachers, your report, also the psychoeducational report, and classroom observations. And our decision in this committee is that he is eligible for special learning disability services. Yeah.
So are we all in agreement that Forrest would be found eligible for a specific learning disability?
Yes.
And speech language impairment, same thing. We do not feel that there is a lack of instruction in math or reading, nor he is not limited English proficiency. We did note that there was a significant discrepancy in his communication skills and fluency, and also the following areas, which is the student does not demonstrate limited English proficiency and or is not a speaker of a socio-cultural dialect. There's documentation of an adverse effect on educational performance due to one or more documented characteristics of speech-language impairment, referring to as stuttering. And due to the identified speech-language impairment, the student needs specially designed instruction. And sources of data that we looked at is parent report, the psychoeducational information, classroom observations, and also grades. So now it's our decision if he is going to be eligible for speech-language services.
What is everybody's?
Yes.
Agreed?
Yes, it's appropriate.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Mrs. Gump, do you have any questions after everything that you've heard this afternoon, or any questions for us?
No,
Or
I
anything?
don't think so. Everything sounds really good.
All right, so we're going to get you to sign saying that you agree that Forrest will be found eligible for special education services under the specific learning disability. And I believe our next step as a group will be to meet again to look at Forrest's IEP, which is his individualized educational plan, which will be written by his case manager and possibly a special education teacher to look at some goals and objectives that he will meet. So we'll meet again. Let's look at our calendars to determine a date for that. So today is November 22nd. So we're looking at right now December 12th for his IEP meeting. Does that date work for you?
That'd be
So
fine.
we'll come back together for that. And so this is your procedural safeguards and rights and responsibilities for special education. So your rights as a parent. So I'm going to give this to you, and we'll offer it again to you probably as well. And again, before his IEP meeting, you will receive written notice of that as well as a reminder. But we thank you for coming out today and talking with us about Forest and for meeting everybody here. We appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. And then the big red